And let me just adjust the view real quick. Okay, I'm here, but I'll be in the background and passing it over to you two. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Kent. Well, welcome. Today I am speaking with Nixo, who is the Executive Director of EthStaker. Thank you for speaking with me and connecting today. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I'm starting my journey as a non-traditional node validator. Personally, I work in healthcare, so I don't have a background in any finance or tech, but I am very fascinated by how blockchain works and how the technology is growing. And I know I want to be a part of it. So what I wanted to do is reach out to the Ethereum staking community experts like yourself to get some tips and pointers on getting started and to really hear about other people's stories for motivation. So Nixo, could you just tell me kind of your background, your professional experience, and how you got started?
So I'm going to be very honest. In college, I wanted to buy things that I wasn't supposed to buy. And so I did a deep dive on the internet and found out that Silk Road existed. I bought some Bitcoin with that. And I remember the first time I ever bought Bitcoin, you couldn't go fiat to Bitcoin online. So I had to go to a miner's house. And the miner was just so into Bitcoin and so like gung ho about it that he had his whole apartment decked out in Bitcoin memorabilia. Like he had that, I forget what they call it, the physical coin that represents a Bitcoin. He had a couple of those that he was showing me. He had a Bitcoin ATM in his house. It was a proof of concept thing at that point. And he like patted me on the back. He had a 6-year-old daughter with him, and he was like, "You're really doing a good thing for yourself. You're setting yourself up for the rest of your life. This is going to absolutely explode." I think this was like 2012 or 20, I think it was 2012. And I just kind of looked at him and I was like, "You're insane. I just, you know that I'm gonna spend this, right?" So a year or two went by, it exploded. I realized I was an idiot. I went online and I was an idiot about it, and I just bought whatever cryptocurrencies I could find. And then 6 months to a year later, I checked it in on my investments and realized that I had bought a bunch of Russian rubles because I had not done my research. And at that point, I was like, all right, never mind. So I came back a couple years later, and I had noticed something new listed on one of the Russian websites that I was using. Bought some ETH, briefly played the trading game, realized that I was not good at that. I didn't want to play any degen games. So I held on to that through the 2018, 2019, 2020 bear market. And then when staking came online, I started to see this number 32 thrown around, and I didn't know what it was. And so I started doing a little bit more research into it. Found out it was about staking, did my research on staking. And then as I was as I spun up a testnet node, I started answering other people's questions about staking. And I was spending just like way too much time on the EthStaker forums. And so at some point, somebody from EthStaker reached out to me and said, "Hey, you're on this forum a lot answering other people's questions. Would you like to help moderate this forum?" I said yes. And then after that, they could not get rid of me. And any chance they offered me to do more for the organization, I grabbed at until eventually they put me in charge of a lot more. So that is my story. That's how I got into EthStaker. This is the only place in crypto that I've ever been where I don't feel like I'm gambling. Like there was a piece where I did, I think it's 3 weeks long, where I traded for a little while, but I did not, it induced too much anxiety in me, and staking felt like a safe route to go, where you were actually putting your money to work in something that if the staking smart contract goes wrong, doesn't matter. Ethereum doesn't matter anyway. So it felt like the safest thing I could get into, and helping others get into it helps the entire ecosystem. So that's how I got into EthStaker.
So did you have a mentor that kind of helped you along the way, or did you just go on these forums and figure it out on your own?
I had a mentor. So once I started getting into EthStaking, the really big name at the time was Superfizz, because Superfizz and Lamboshi created this EthStaker organization, and what Superfizz was creating a lot of the content. He calls himself the talking head of EthStaker. He was putting in a lot of videos. He had this video series called State of the Stake, and he's one of those people who, like, once he gets into something, he goes all in. So I was watching his like video series, and he's actually the person who reached out to moderate the forum. And then I was an environmental scientist until last year. And once I started getting really into Ethereum, I actually quit my job and I said, I'm going to go to a coding boot camp and I'm going to learn how to code because I want to work in Ethereum. I want to write Solidity code. And he reached out to me and said, I saw you quit your job. I actually have some opportunities for you if you want these opportunities instead of going and learning how to code. And so I took those opportunities. The first one was a talk at EY, and he helped me through it. He sat there while I gave my presentation to him a couple of times, and yeah, he really helped give me like a leg up in getting started with staking.
So you really started early, like early on. Have you always been with Ethereum? Did you ever do any proof of work?
I never mind. Mining to me seems like one of those things that people who like love to build computers, love to like really get into the hardware. And like until a month ago, I had never even installed RAM in a computer. And so the idea of like, yeah, the idea of having a computer that I built that like was terrifying to me. So as soon as staking came online and it was like, you can buy an Intel NUC to do this, I was like, sign me up. That sounds great.
So really it's just learning the software and just really getting that community help and mentorship that you were able to kind of build upon what you knew and became an expert.
Yeah. When I was 18, my dad bought me a computer. And at the time I really wanted a MacBook, but MacBooks are super expensive. He had bought me like I forget what kind of computer it was. It was like a little Dell. I had told him that I wanted a MacBook. So he was like, you know what? We're going to erase Windows off of this and we're going to put Linux on it. And at the time I'm like a shithead 18-year-old. So I'm like, I don't want a like weird operating system on it. But it ended up making me really comfortable with things like copying and pasting into command line, because installing new applications on Linux, especially like everything is open source there, so some things are broken. You have to go Google the problem, figure it out, copy and paste these commands that you don't understand into your computer to figure out to like fix it. And so when staking came online, it was sort of like, here, Summer ESAT and CoinCashew have written guides. And all you have to do is copy paste these commands. You don't have to understand the commands. And I was like, that's my bread and jam. I can do that.
Thank you, Dad.
Yes.
I've never used Linux. I've read the forums like, oh, it's probably the best thing to use and it's pretty easy to use, but sounds like you just got to get used to it like any system.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think the thing that I ended up really liking about it, so I did actually end up getting a MacBook a few years later, but I continued to use my Linux machine because such a community of open source software developers, and I love how much tweaking you can do with it and how excited people are to build things. So you get software on a MacBook and it's usually something that like is polished. You won't know the developer, it's closed source, and it's just made to work. It always works on a MacBook. But you like when you download something on a Linux computer, sometimes you can like email the developer and be like, hey, I would really like it to do this thing, and they're super responsive, or they're like living off of crumbs and they're like, can you donate $5 to me? Like, I built this for free, no one pays for it. No, so like it like really made it feel like a small community of people, and I really, really liked that, and I like continue to like that even like with my mobile operating system. It's this like custom operating system, but everything I try to primarily install apps from the Asteroid store. It's called the Asteroid store. It's like the free and open source app store, but it's like I really like the ethos that like open source developers bring to the world.
Makes sense.
Go
ahead.
Have you experienced like that's how Rocket Pool feels a bit? Like you go in there and people are building things on top of the Rocket Pool protocol. People are building like open source websites to like look at data, and people are just so excited in that community. It's just such a special thing that they've built.
Yeah, so I haven't actually started my node validation yet. I have so Kent is my mentor, and so we have a 6-month time frame up and running. So that's the plan. So I think December 26th is my goal to be up and running. So I'm just basically learning everything I can. Community has been so helpful. I've spoken with a lot of people from Rocket Pool, and the community has like just really reached out, and I've had, some people DM me and say, hey, I went through this, I'm non-tech, you can do this. So it's really motivational to hear other people out in the community and to get that support to say, this is something you can do. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I don't know anything about you. I'd love to hear like like, so how did you hear about Rocket Pool or staking in general? And like, how did you meet Kent as the mentor?
Yeah, so kind of funny story. I'm a nurse practitioner. I've been in healthcare for the last 20 years. I just kept going to school. I've been in school. I got my doctorate and I work in kidney transplant. And I got into Web3 crypto probably about 3 years ago when one of the physicians that I worked with did a medical grand rounds on Bitcoin, believe it or not. And I started researching it. I was really strategic and researched as much as I could. And then I started investing and I just kind of got addicted to the technology. And lo and behold, University of Cincinnati opened up one of the very first crypto economics labs, University of Cincinnati, and I work for the hospital. So I contacted the director and said, hey, I want to be a part of this. So I met with him, treated it like an interview. He was like, okay, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I want to teach. I'm a really good teacher. If I can teach my patients what chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy is, then I can probably teach, mining, crypto, that kind of thing. So he's like, okay, learn how to mine. So my first mentor actually was a 18-year-old student from India who started mining in India with his brother when he was 16 years old. So he taught me how to set up a mining rig, and then he taught me, I learned, and then I taught it and then did an educational video on it. And then I got into hardware wallets. I started reviewing all these hardware wallets and started doing interviews. And that's how I met Kent. And he started talking to me about Rocket Pool, and I started learning more. And then I just kind of did to learning more.
I would be curious to know how somebody in your field developed a curiosity about crypto, because I feel like most people who are not in tech cultures that are like adjacent, who are hearing a lot about it, develop really negative perceptions of crypto because all they hear about crypto are all the scams that are running through the news. And so,
I was walking around the other day, like I have a resolution for that. So there's just like a lot of real world use cases that I can see that can help, that blockchain can help.
Absolutely. I think there's even a lot going on. I'm not intimately familiar with it, but I know one of the opportunities that Superbiz helped me get last year was I spoke at the EY conference, and I gave a talk on the transition from proof of work to proof of stake, because that was sort of like I joined staking as the beacon chain came online, and I was never involved in proof of work, but I knew exactly what that transition was going to entail, and I kind of represented the new system coming online. And I lost my train of thought.
You were talking
EY. So EY has a ton of business applications. And so when I was at that conference, a lot of people whose specific projects at EY worked with various parts. And I remember one of them was talking about how they tracked blood donations on chain. And I couldn't believe that like there are so many applications that we don't know about that are already happening behind the scenes. And EY's blockchain sector.
Medical trials. Just think how much information we could get from medical trials that would help with HIPAA violation and be able to get that information. Scrubs, they need to tokenize scrubs because no one returns those scrubs.
Oh, interesting.
So there's just, I guess I've kind of always been like a problem solver, and I'm always about let's make it easier and think about this. So I think that's what fascinates me really, and that it's a lot. There's a lot, and there's different arenas and areas. But as a node validator, I think my interest is because you're earning that passive income, and you're building the network. You're helping, you're like a part of building this network that nobody owns, decentralized. And it's this whole like building a greater good, helping people get a job and real opportunities that you couldn't have before.
Yeah, and that was my impetus behind like getting more involved here. So I'm writing my talk right now for Ethereum Argentina, which is next week. And one of the things that I'm talking about is how when I worked in environmental science, I worked in a public good. Like I provided data sets. My project provided data sets to other scientists who then use those data sets. And there was like a whole conference around these data sets. And when I moved into crypto, a lot of people asked me like, wow, like environmental science to crypto, you really sold out, didn't you? Like the thing that I sometimes do and sometimes don't explain to them is I feel like both are public goods, because the consensus mechanism is one that makes sure that nobody owns too much of the chain, and like it keeps Ethereum in that place where it's credibly neutral, so you can use it without thinking like, oh, I'm just using a system that benefits the top 1%. And keeping that node, that validator set decentralized is, I feel like, the public good that is going to make the most impact on whether or not like I even want Ethereum to exist in the future. Because if Ethereum is captured by some entity who profits at the top off of all of the validation that happens because they own most of the chain, or they've like changed incentives to where a lot of the validation ends up like funneling towards them, what's the benefit of that at that point? And so
Yeah.
just like in this time of solidifying Ethereum, what Ethereum is before ossification, if that ever happens, of the protocol, I think that making sure that the incentive structure of the consensus mechanism stays to equally benefit everyone who's using and validating the chain is like one of the most important places that I can be.
Awesome. So what advice do you
so
need getting started? Like what? So I'm just getting started. I ended up setting my DApp node up, but I'm really just trying to really learn the ecosystem and then just be prepared, you know, for in a few months to do the test net and just get up and running. But do you have any words of wisdom or advice for me as I'm learning all of this?
have you found the ETH Finance Daily yet?
No, I haven't.
There's a subreddit, it's called r/ETH Finance, and it's just a group of people who are posting in this subreddit every single day, and it's a really welcoming and fun area. We have like, before I was full-time in crypto, we would make jokes because people have that meme gentleman. They'll say like, this is gentlemen or whatever, and I would always respond to be like, and ladies. So there was a meme where they would start saying gentlemen and the one lady in here. And there are like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 of us who have popped up and have been like, yeah, we're ladies. And it's just a really good place to ask questions and learn things because people really put a lot of effort into responding and treating you like you're not just another person on the internet. A lot of things.
Finance. I will definitely check it out.
You can also get there by ethfinance.org. It'll like redirect you to the subreddit.
So tell me about EthStaker. I got on there and I will say I was literally impressed because I've been looking at trying to figure out easy to use guide for the non-technical savvy person. And there's not a lot out there. There's a lot about what staking is, how to stake, a general overview, but there's not a lot of hardware information. And I really appreciated that was broken down on EthStaker. Can you tell me just a little bit more about the site and how it got started?
Yeah, sure. Real quick, I will say just like a little segue. Part of the reason why there's so little information about hardware is because the hardware requirements are so unclear because some RAMs don't work, like some RAMs don't work well with the computer that comes with it. And so EthStaker, like the two core members in EthStaker who are the most knowledgeable about hardware are Remy and York, and they don't like to recommend out of the box mini PCs because they're like, well, this one comes with a hard drive that isn't very good for this computer. It's just the cheapest one that they can offer.
Really?
Yeah, so they have like, Remy has a list of recommended software, and it is all separate computers, RAMs, and hardware and hard drives. And when I first came in, I was like, is there nowhere online you can buy it? Because this, like, telling someone to unscrew something on a computer is already going to be such a big barrier. I've never done that before. So like, if I'm not comfortable doing that and I'm comfortable like changing the operating system on my phone, that already rules out a huge number of people. Turns out it's really easy. I did it for the first time last month. It's not I was scaring myself for now. But EthStaker as an organization got started because Superfizz and Nolan, like this was back in early 2020. Superfizz and Nolan is aka Lamboshi. We're in some forum or in some Discord talking about how staking was coming online. They needed a better place to like aggregate the people who wanted to start staking because when staking came online, they were nervous that the beacon chain wouldn't have enough validators to come online. I forget what the number was, but they needed to pass some threshold as soon as it came online for it to be a success. And I mean, they shot past that threshold, mostly because people like Superfizz and Nolan were creating all of these guides and like all of this excitement and all of this buzz, and like everybody wanted to be like a Genesis validator. And so they sort of rolled that hype into, okay, now the merge is coming. And somebody needs to be like the disinterested party that aggregates all the information about like how to keep your node updated, how to switch to these different clients that are coming online. Because when it first came on, like Geth was the only like robust option that was available, and so everybody had Geth on their nodes. And then client diversity became an initiative because it matters to have like different versions of different software running on this, because if only one version of the software is on there and there's one bug, then the whole network goes down. And so client diversity became an issue. And I think that's like the first time that people outside of like this early Genesis validator cohort started becoming aware of EthStaker, because Superfizz was so loud about his initiative on getting client diversity to a healthier mix of clients. And then the site actually, we had a nice site back in 2021. 2022, I think the developer for the site sort of like dropped out. And then this year, Hani Abu, who is part of EthStaker, built our entire site from the ground up and made this beautiful site. And now he's working on explicitly what you're asking for, which is we want to make a guide that's A to Z. Like, you don't have anything, you don't know anything about staking. Here's where you go to buy this is what the internet requirements are going to be. Day 2, you've received your hardware. You need to switch out this RAM. We're debating whether or not to like do an out of the box thing or have people switch out their RAM and hard drive to begin with, which I think we're going to go with that. But it's hard to write these guides, especially because key generation is such an issue, because key generation
really
should happen on an offline computer, and everybody who's technically competent says like, oh, do this on an air-gapped computer, and then they move forward. And like when I read that, I was like, nobody knows what an air-gapped computer is. An air-gapped computer is a computer that has never been online, that will never be online, that's a safe place to generate your 24-word seed.
Right.
And no, like normal people don't have extra computers in their houses that have never been online. That's not a thing that like other people have. When they go through this guide and they say, do this on an air-gapped computer, already you've got people who are like, okay, I think it actually has you, they go the route that other people don't want to go. So people in EthStaker almost skip over this on purpose, because they're like, you could do it a less secure way, but I don't want to advise you to do that, because if you come back and say there was malicious software on my computer that was viewing my screen as I generated my keys, they don't want to be like, well, this is the way we told you to do it. And so I think DAppNode actually goes the other direction and like lets you do it in a way that's more accessible to more people, slightly less secure, but honestly like totally acceptable, unless you have a computer that is like, that does have a super rare piece of software that's always monitoring, which 99.999% of the world is never going to have something like that on their computer unless they're already like a high value individual who is targeted and has downloaded malicious files.
Right.
So yeah, it's a difficult thing to write this guide that's geared towards beginners who might not like know what an air-gapped computer is, but Hani Abu is doing a really great job on writing that. And I'm a stumbling block here. I need to write that air-gapped computer part.
Yeah, there's so much that, is common sense to them, but someone like myself would be like, well, what? And then you're like Googling it for like 5 minutes and trying to figure out what one word is.
Yeah, and if you get a sentence where you have to Google 3 things in it, all of a sudden this is like way too hard. And it kicks out so many people out of the pipeline.
Yeah, I do appreciate the site though, because I briefly brushed on it before I spoke with you today, and I was pretty impressed. I was like, oh, he's got all the hardware down, and he's got like how to assemble it, like you were saying, like this may not fit with this computer, this is the software you need or the type of computer you need. So that's the information that is, I think what I am probably the most hesitant or afraid on is the hardware portion and figuring out that. I'm like, I can figure out how to deposit my staking and I know wallets and stuff, and I can figure all that out, but it's getting the hardware and then the software and then figuring out the security stuff and the what ifs.
Yeah, and another thing is when you buy like a mini PC online, it'll tell you this comes with a 2 terabyte SSD, and then people in EthStaker will be like, hey, what brand is it? and you're looking at this listing that you bought from, and you're like, it doesn't say what brand the SSD was. Like, how am I supposed to know that? Yeah, and they're like, oh, just go and
Just tell me what I need to buy, where, click.
I almost wish that we were a big enough operation to be able to just buy all of these computers, put them together ourselves, and resell them in a trustworthy way. But it's also difficult to like, you don't want to buy any hardware from a reseller who like is specifically selling it to you for staking, because they might have put malicious code on it. And unless it's like a trusted organization like DAppNode, like there, you don't know whether or not that's a safe thing to do.
Yeah. That's true. So, Nixo, do you have like a good story as a node validator? Like you had a crazy downtime, or did something happen to your node that you weren't expecting, or that you had to troubleshoot?
Well, I guess my stories right now are going to hinge on the fact that I'm a crypto nomad right now. I don't have a router and a modem, and so what I keep doing is I buy these little mini PCs that I'm testing out for some EthStaker thing that I'm doing. And then I'll drop it at a friend's house and connect it to their internet. And they're like, what kind of hacker stuff are you putting on my network? And I'm like, don't worry about it. It's just going to use like 1 terabyte of data a month. It's not going to be okay. But
do you have them in hundreds of houses across the US, the world?
So far, I just have them at 3. But it does become a problem. So one of my friends moved, and that was my main node. And so this is a good story for people not having to worry about downtime. My friend packed up the node. I remotely logged into it, shut it down. He packed it up, sent it to me, and it was offline for 3 weeks while I just figured out where I wasn't stressed about it. I wasn't worried about it. I just 3 weeks later, it came back online. It was just fine. I bought a different I replaced some of the pieces on there, but it's been super unstressful, just because like, especially the amount of time that has been online. Now if I have it offline, it's still just money that I wouldn't have had anyway if it hadn't been staked in the first place. Yeah, so I don't know, I've had a pretty good experience. I did have a hardware issue for a while where my NUC was just going offline all the time. So one of those smart plugs that you can turn on and off with a computer, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. I will be able to like, if something happens to it and I can't remote into it and I don't know what's going on, I can remotely reboot it by just unplugging it and plugging it back in. And I didn't realize that like you have to change a setting in it that says like, if the computer detects power, turn on. So I was all proud of this. I was so stoked, and I was like, oh, I can just turn it off and turn it back on. And then I went out of the country and something went wrong with it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to use this for the first time. And I turned it back on and the computer just stayed off. And I was like, oh, that's right. If you just unplug a computer, it doesn't turn back on by itself. I felt so clever, and I was like at a conference showing my friends, and I was like, "Oh, I can do this."
That's funny.
Actually, hold on. Yeah, I don't know. It's been one of those things that I just set and forget most of the time.
Yeah. So, do you know any other females that do node validation? I
think that one of the girls in East Finance may run a node. I'm not positive, maybe not. I'm not sure.
Okay.
There is someone who their profile picture is female presenting. They've got she, her in the little description. And I think she runs a rocket pool. I'm not personally acquainted with her, but she's in the trading channel in Rocket Pool. So that might be someone to reach out to as well.
And it's really hard to tell, but my guess is there's not many. But because it sounds very intimidating and techy, but everyone that I've spoken to has said, once you figure this out, it's not hard. The amount of time that you put into it is not a lot to have, really good staking benefits and rewards.
Yeah. And I don't want to like bring up too much controversial stuff, but like one of the things that I did when I first joined EthStaker was I posted out there, somebody from an organization had contacted us and been like, hey, we need a committee for something. It's like a judgment or some sort of panel. And they said, we want you guys to put this panel together, but we would like at least 3 seats of these to be filled by underrepresented minorities. And so I posted in EthStaker just thinking like, oh, this is gonna go fine. And I said, if you're an underrepresented minority, please reach out to me. And I said, like, I'm a woman. I especially would like women stakers to reach out to me. And I got a lot of responses from people who were like, everybody's behind a pseudonym right now. Technology doesn't discriminate. Why are you trying to reach out to? Yeah, and I was really discouraged by that, because I think that people don't realize like how funneled men are into even believing in themselves, like when it comes to knowing if you can open a computer and, oh, you're so good at this, and like women aren't told that, aren't asked like, oh, are you going into computer science? And like, there are reasons why there aren't very many female node operators. And it's not, you can't just say technology doesn't discriminate because it doesn't know what gender you are. And it's like, well, it's so much more complicated than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What would you say is like one professional achievements that you're most proud of?
That's a hard question. I think that I would have to think about that. I am I'm the principal organizer right now of the staking gathering in DevConnect, and that is this November. And I feel like that's going to be a smashing success the way that like we are prepared for that. And I'm really proud of that so far. I'm really excited for it. I've never organized an event. Well, actually in East Denver, I organized like a happy hour, and that went great. We got a lot of stakers together, and it went well. But this is actually like a conference that I'm organizing, and I haven't done that before. I'm not going to what?
Are you going to East Toronto next week?
I'm not. No. Are you located in Toronto?
No, but I'm going.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm excited to go. It'll be my first ETH conference. So
nice. I did look at that, but it's during the same time as Ethereum Argentina, and I had already agreed to talk at Ethereum Argentina, and so it's like, well,
that's awesome. Well, I know we're almost out of time, but I do want to thank you for your valuable information and time, and your story is just very motivational to me because you have quite the following, and you're an inspiration to a lot of people. You're kind of their resource guide, so that's pretty cool. You've done a lot in a short period of time. So
hey, I'm glad to hear it. You're equally as inspiring to come in here and try to be entrepreneurs or like start companies or like try to grab a piece of the pie, you know? And I feel really excited that you're coming in from like a scientific standpoint, thinking like this is a technology of the future, and I'm excited to participate in it and learn about it and become more involved in it. And I hope that we can bring more people like you into this industry, because you are like the ideal person coming in to stake.
I'm excited. Well, I'm following you on Twitter now, so maybe one day in the future, once I start staking, then maybe we'll meet up somewhere as maybe staking events or ETH or something. But yeah, I would love to update once I'm up and running. I would love to give you an update. It's one thing I do is I keep my word. So when I say I'm going to do something, it happens. So I'm excited to DCA all my Ethereum now. So hopefully I'll have enough in 5 months to go.
Nice. Well, if you have any inclination to connect in November in Istanbul, let me know. I would love to help out with that and get you at the staking gathering.
All right. Well, very nice to meet you. So I'm going to check that out as well.
Awesome. Yeah, we do some community calls with projects. We haven't done one right now, but
good luck on your event. I'm sure it'll go great, and let's connect soon.
Awesome. It was great to meet you.
Also, bye.